that camera. Look at her. Just do what you want. Let's get started with the history of ska. I just like open lecture. Just say what you gotta say.
Open lecture. Okay. So, ska is an art form originated in the 1960s in Jamaica, and it evolved out of Southern shuffle blues because let's go back a couple of years. So, after World War II, Jamaica saw like a surge in like economic prosperity, so they could like buy radios, which was like revolutionary at the time. But there were no like Jamaican radio stations, so they would just like they would just listen to whatever that was playing in the South. And what was really popular at that time is Southern shuffle blues, like Fats Domino. I'm not gonna play an example because it's shit, but it evolved out of that. First wave ska, I'm saying, evolved out of that, and they called it ska because it had a guitar on the offbeats, and they called that a skank. And that skank actually is directly related to Fats Domino because he would always have piano hits on the offbeat. And so they created this genre called ska, and then eventually they got Jamaican radio stations up and running, and that's what they would play for the masses to listen to. And you might know it by a different name because its name has changed in recent years. It's now called reggae, but actually it was originally called ska, and it still is called ska. But anyways, so I got a little listening example for you here. This is Israelites by Desmond Decker. This is one of the first ska songs from the 1960s.
The album cover says classic reggae.
Because reggae is the new name for ska, as I have already said. Have you paid attention?
Thank you.
Welcome.
So this cover is wrong.
Yes.
Alright.
You hear that like gat. That's called a skank. That's what makes it ska. Okay, but first wave ska is pretty shit, right? It's like fine, but there's better stuff. So it continued like that for a while. And nobody like outside of Jamaica really listened to it. But in the 70s and 80s, let's shoot this real quick. Get some B-roll footage of Andy holding the mic. Okay, I'm ready. Pay attention. All right. So in the 70s and 80s, in the United Kingdom, this was kind of a thing that was happening. Was skinhead metal was becoming popular, which it doesn't have that connotation in Europe anymore. But nowadays in America, skinhead has a connotation for being very racist and white supremacist.
You don't say.
Which was the case in the 70s in Britain, and so there was a lot of British youths, one might say, youths that were falling under the sway of skinhead ideology. And so as a response to this, the Specials, who are from somewhere in England, were like, hey, fuck that. And so they made music that included island rhythms from the Caribbean, which was until recently a colony of the UK. And also several of the people in the Specials are from Jamaica. And so they started making this music, and it was all about unity, and they're like, hey man, black people are all right, you know? And then it became big, and that fusion of rock music, which was popular at the time, and the island rhythms of the Caribbean, which used to be a colony of the UK, that was second wave ska. So I got another listening example for you. This one is by the Specials. They popularized this whole thing, this black and white thing, checkered. Second wave ska is also called two-tone because they would all wear black and white suits, and they would all wear like little pork pie hats, you know? They just basically looked like old people. And so here is, you probably heard this one because it's good, but this is their most famous song.
I'm gonna pull the album cover.
You might know it from the Chef soundtrack. That's where it was most popularly implemented.
Is that?
Yes.
Is that a fact in the 2014 movie Chef? Just like 10,000-year-old song was popularized.
Yeah, well,
Wait, no,
yes.
that's true. I recognize this from Shaft, but only from Shaft.
Also, your mom listened to the specials. This is her ska. It's like fine, but it's not good. I mean, it's good, but it's like in comparison to other ska, it's fine. But this is second wave ska. You see, it's like it's not quite as fast, but it uses rock. I mean, it's faster, not quite as slow, and it uses like rock instrumentation. And if you could see from the album cover, a couple of their band members are from the West Indies, as they were known. And so that happened for a while. It also got really popular in Germany, where it is still popular to this day. Not really much else to say about that. But then in the 90s, in the late 80s and the early 90s, in America, especially Boston and Orange County, a bunch of jazz musicians decided, hey, you know, jazz is kind of shit. We should do something else. And so they were experimenting, looking around, hearing different sounds, you know, just vibing around, until eventually some of them came across second wave or two-tone ska from the UK. And they're like, hey, this is pretty alright, let's make it good. And so they started making, at that point it was still two-tone ska. And they would just be going with their little skanks on their guitars, just playing in the jazz clubs. And then eventually, because a big part of second wave ska was like racial unity and like evening out like class and race divides, they started playing with a bunch of punk bands because they had like the same crowd of listeners, and so they started playing together. And then over time, they just like the sounds started to merge, and so third wave ska, which was called ska-core at the time, but is no longer called ska-core, was born. Sometimes it's called ska punk because it's a fusion of second wave ska and punk.
Wow!
Will the fish sell out? Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion.
Was a really popular one in the 90s. It's called Sellout by Real Big Fish. And then in the third wave, this is when skanking became popular. This is how you skank.
Do you want to describe skanking?
Basically what it is, like pretend you're running, but like don't actually go anywhere. And also, like, because it was rich white jazz musicians that were creating this music, get out of here. A lot of college students listen to it, and so it also got like a culture of like young and like weird. So like this shirt is very ska, but like
Is it music too loud right now?
that's where it came from.
Or can you still hear it?
With me tonight, the record companies only give me lots of money and everything's gonna be alright.
So this shirt is very ska. Like the really bright colors and like the dots and the conflicting patterns and all that shit. That started to become a thing. Here's some ska Vans. That started to become a thing. And so they started co-opting first wave ska terminology, which it doesn't mean any of the stuff it used to mean anymore. And they would say, hey, that's pretty rude boy. And that's what fans of ska are called. They're called rude boys. And so it like cemented a culture of, here's how you be a rude boy. And it's basically just fuck around. And now ska is dead, but it's kind of coming back.
Wait, is that it? Is that the whole history of ska?
That's where we are right now. I mean, there's some new shit. Actually, no, I lied. They made a new band called Streetlight Manifesto, and they started operating in 2011, I think. And they have really brought, I'm not gonna say mainstream, but they've brought ska to the alternative scene in full force. And they're the most popular ska band to come out of the post-90s. This is one of their most famous songs off their new album, The Hands That Thieve.
Don't step on the switch, Jesus Christ.
Ska now exists at this point as a thing in history, but you know, other than the like racial inclusiveness that comes out of two-tone ska in the 70s and 80s, there's not really a whole like culture about it. There's like, yeah, there's rude boy fashion. This is rude, but like, that's about it. Well, you know, after in the 90s a little bit, but it's really blossomed after that. Ska has really taken on like a culture of its own, you know, and it's all about. I'm gonna let Real Big Fish tell you what it's all about, but you gotta listen to the song. So, you know, the whole thing is like, you know, yeah, the world's shit and nothing matters. But, you know, let's dance. Let's have a good time while we're here, you know? So that's ska. It's pretty good. You should check it out. Oh, yeah, let me, like, do, like, a list of, like, ska songs you might have heard.
Oh, okay.
Here's, like, the big boy. Nobody thinks this is ska, because they don't know what ska is, but this is ska. This is ska. There's some other stuff.
Impression that I get.
Oh yeah, what the fuck am I on about?
I wonder if I can find videos of us playing the impression that I get for this.
God, I hope not. This one's been popular in recent days.
Thanks to America's Funniest Home Videos.
It does have a very similar sound because America's Funniest Home Videos is ska. But that's not what all ska sounds like. Some ska is pretty dark. Not this. This isn't very dark. The lyrics kind of don't make any sense. But
What's ska's role in like popular culture? Like outside of America's Funniest Home Videos.
I'd say it's kind of like a scapegoat. You know, it's like the Jews. You know, everybody just blames it on the Jews.
Whoa, this is getting low. Alright.
Okay.
Did you ever say who you were?
I'm Doug.
Alright, that's a cut. That's a wrap, everyone.
Cut drops clean.
Hell yeah.
I was like starting like the middle of your lesson right now, and then we'll film the beginning, and then it'll be like at the middle you'll be eating Taco Bell in the beginning, then in the middle we're driving to Taco Bell as you describe the middle.
That'd be great.
But I think that might be too much.
That might be a little much.
Hi, can I get a 4-pack of Cinnabon Delights, a beefy Frito burrito, a spicy potato soft taco, the Chalupa Cravings box with Baja Blast to drink, and that'll be it.